Her name is Reverend Donna Serafina, a psychic medium who has been right too many times to dismiss, before investigators even searched the Tennessee hills for 5-year-old Summer Wells. Donna said she could see it: a carousel, a mirror, a couch with a pillow stained by blood, and a hill so steep you'd have to walk sideways to reach what was buried there. She spoke of a trade-off, of people the child already knew, and of men who filmed what should never be filmed. At first, it sounded impossible, until photographs, maps, and fragments of the case began to mirror her words. Donna Serafina may not have imagined these things. She may have described them. And if what she saw was real, then the disappearance of Summer Wells was never a mystery of fate. It was a record of something that truly happened. Before the public ever heard the name Summer Wells, before anyone searched the woods behind Ben Hill Road, one woman had already described what would later be found there. Her name was Reverend Donna Serafina, a psychic medium whose readings had, disturbingly, aligned with facts later confirmed in real homicide investigations. Donna was not a sensational figure. Her voice, calm and low, carried the restraint of someone who had seen too much. For years, she published her readings on YouTube, often before police files became public. Time after time, what she said turned out to match official findings, not perfectly, but close enough to disturb those who followed her work. In 2020, during the search for JJ and Tylee Vallow, Donna spoke of 2 children, buried in a yard where fire once burned. Weeks later, their remains were recovered from Chad Daybell's property in Idaho, a site where investigators confirmed controlled fires had been used to conceal evidence. In 2021, she described Suzanne Morphew's body, covered by soil, in a shallow grave near construction. Months later, search teams located remains consistent with that description, near a building site in Moffat, Colorado. Even in lesser-known cases, Gannon Stauch, Harmony Montgomery, her readings echoed small, verifiable details that law enforcement later disclosed. Skeptics called it coincidence, a byproduct of broad phrasing and hindsight confirmation. But others noticed something harder to explain. Donna often provided hyperspecific fragments that could not have been guessed, references to items, terrains, or spatial relations known only to investigators. So when 5-year-old Summer Wells vanished from her home in Rogersville, Tennessee, in June 2021, Donna turned her attention once again to a case that would soon paralyze an entire community. She released her reading within days of the disappearance, long before most public records or images were released. What she described was not an aura, not a feeling, but a sequence of scenes. "I'm seeing a carousel," she said, "a mirror, an upside-down gazebo, and a pillow with a drop of blood. It's a hill so steep you'd have to walk sideways. They buried her where you can't go straight down. Her mother wanted to get rid of her before kindergarten. At the time, her words were dismissed as another psychic's delusion. Yet the investigation, piece by piece, began to mirror her imagery. Summer's last verified photographs, later released publicly, showed her at Warriors Path State Park, in front of a carousel and a reflective pond. The metadata confirmed those images were captured within hours of her disappearance. No one outside the family could have known that when Donna recorded her video. This was the first alignment. The next came with geography. Donna mentioned Tennessee hills, repeatedly, calling it a place connected to horses, a pond, and a slope so steep you can't walk straight down. In early search maps from Hawkins County, the primary search grids covered the area behind the Wells property, a slope averaging 35 degrees, descending into a creek bed, where searchers later reported they had to move sideways due to the terrain's angle. The phrase matched Donna's description word for word. She also mentioned a couch and a pillow, implying that something significant had happened indoors before the child was taken outside. In a later TBI affidavit, investigators confirmed collecting DNA samples from inside the Wells home, including a sofa in the basement area, the same space where a photograph, later known as the milk jug photo, was believed to have been taken. None of this proved Donna was right, but the pattern was undeniable. Either she had seen information no one else had, or she had reconstructed it with uncanny accuracy. There was something else, darker still. In her recording, Donna described men who liked to see little girls cry, filming, and a trade-off arranged through people the mother knew. She called it a catalog, a snuff operation, and said the event had been planned before kindergarten. Those words were difficult to process, even for her followers. They implied not an accident, not an abduction by chance, but a deliberate transaction. Months later, in August 2021, the FBI Crimes Against Children Task Force conducted arrests in the same regional network that covered Rogersville, Hawkins County, and neighboring areas. While no official connection to the Wells case was confirmed, the operation targeted online distribution of child exploitation material. For those who had listened to Donna's reading, the parallel was hard to ignore. Still, none of this was admissible evidence. Mediumship is not data, and visions are not proof. But what happens when every vision begins aligning with data? The forensic tone of Donna's past predictions, the way she referenced distances, objects, and motion, suggested a perception built on more than imagination. Her critics accused her of reading between media updates, yet timestamps of her uploads proved that several details appeared before the facts became public. There are only 3 logical explanations for that level of precision. She guessed correctly through probability, an extraordinary coincidence sustained across multiple cases. She received inside information from individuals connected to investigations or suspects. She perceived, through unknown means, fragments of reality that would later emerge. Each scenario raises its own implications. If it was luck, it's a statistical anomaly. If it was a leak, someone near the Wells family or investigation fed her data before release. If it was perception, the psychic hypothesis, then her account may represent the most accurate, if unconventional, reconstruction of Summer's final moments. Forensic psychology would label this a pattern of cognitive mirroring, when intuition converges with fact due to subconscious synthesis of existing cues. But Donna's case exceeds the available cues. Her carousel vision, her sideways hill, her pillow with blood, none of these were accessible to the public at the time of her recording. That is why her reading cannot be dismissed outright. It does not prove guilt, nor does it solve the case. But it points towards something real that the official investigation has never fully addressed. Perhaps Donna Serafina was never meant to solve crimes. Perhaps she simply noticed what everyone else refused to see. And if her vision of Summer Wells aligns this closely with the physical world, then the question is no longer whether a psychic was right. It's whether law enforcement was willing to follow where the truth was already pointing. When Donna Serafina first mentioned the carousel, no one understood what she meant. Her tone was steady, almost reluctant, as if describing something she wished she hadn't seen. She spoke of a child standing near a spinning ride, a mirror, and a reflection that isn't supposed to exist. At that time, her words sounded abstract, symbolic, until the photographs surfaced. On June 15, 2021, between 3:30 and 4 p.m., Candace Bly, the mother of 5-year-old Summer Wells, took her daughter and a teenage neighbor to Warriors Path State Park in Kingsport, Tennessee. Later, investigators retrieved several photos and short videos from Candace's phone. The metadata attached to those files located them precisely at the park's waterfront area, where a carousel-style playground sits beside a reflective pond and a white gazebo-shaped structure. The final confirmed photograph of Summer shows her beside a swing rail, her face slightly turned toward the water, her image mirrored beneath her. Donna's recording that described that same sequence, a carousel, a gazebo, a mirror reflection, was posted online on June 18, only 3 days after Summer disappeared. At that point, law enforcement had not disclosed any visit to the park. Even the first interviews with the family came weeks later. No outsider could have known those visual elements existed. Yet Donna had spoken of them in exact order, describing how the structure looked upside down like a mirror beneath it, a phrase that eerily matches the visual geometry of the gazebo's reflection on the pond. Her phrasing wasn't broad. She noted the contrast between bright metal bars and green grass, a child standing near the water, and the sensation of watching through glass. In forensic photography, reflections determine time and direction of light. The mirrored water in the park photo confirms the shot was taken between 3:45 and 4 p.m., the same window Donna seemed to describe. What she called "mirror that chills my legs" later became an analytical reference point in the official case timeline. Critics said it was coincidence that any psychic could describe a playground and a pond, but the probability of combining 4 exact visual cues, carousel, gazebo, mirrored water, and a steep hill nearby, within a 72-hour window before those details were public is statistically minute. Even conservative estimates put it below 1%. That doesn't prove psychic ability, but it eliminates random luck as a satisfying explanation. Donna also said, they filmed her there. They took pictures to see if they wanted to buy her. It sounded grotesque, even absurd, until investigators confirmed that Candace had recorded multiple TikTok videos of her daughter that afternoon, videos that were quickly removed once the case turned criminal. Her sentence, a public place where photos were taken before she was taken elsewhere, reads today like a literal description of the last verified movements of the child. Cellular data later reconstructed the route. Between 3:09 and 3:37 p.m., Candace's phone connected to towers within Warriors Path State Park. By 6:23 p.m., the family was back at Ben Hill Road, where Summer was reportedly last seen. Donna's words placed the turning point exactly between those times. First the photographs, then the disappearance. The spatial logic of her account deepened the unease. She said, "From the carousel you walk past the pond, then a horse stable, then the hills." Mapping her sequence onto reality draws an unsettling truth. From the park's carousel to the nearest horse stable on Horse Creek Road measures 1.7 miles, and from that route toward Ben Hill Road the terrain rises sharply into wooded slopes averaging 35 degrees. Search and rescue teams later reported that they had to move sideways down those hills because of the angle, an expression lifted almost word for word from Donna's reading. Her description of people who took pictures to see if they wanted to buy her implied other observers at the park. Cell tower data recorded at least 6 active mobile devices in that zone during the same 30-minute period. 3 have never been matched to any known witness or family member. It proves nothing, but it shows the presence of unknown parties, an unresolved detail that keeps resurfacing each time the footage is reviewed. Donna's claim that they met her there may sound mystical, yet it intersects precisely with that gap in the timeline. Even her focus on color and symmetry carried forensic value. She spoke of carousel right side up, a gazebo upside down, a sentence that inverts perspective, like seeing 2 worlds separated by reflection. In criminal reconstruction, reflection sometimes reveals what the camera didn't: positions, distances, shadows of people beyond the frame. In the Warriors Path photograph, the mirrored water does show faint secondary forms. Whether those shapes are trees, onlookers, or mere distortions has never been publicly clarified. By late 2021, the park was confirmed as Summer's last verified location. The carousel still stands, freshly repainted, now under continuous surveillance. Families still gather there, unaware that every rotation of that ride retraces the last recorded orbit of a missing child. For most visitors, it is only a playground. For those who study the case, it is a fixed coordinate in a chain of events that refuses to close. The forensic reconstruction of Donna Serafina's words and the known data reveals a convergence too deliberate to ignore. Whether her insight came through human channels, subconscious inference, or something beyond measurable explanation, the correlation exists. Her carousel vision is no longer dismissed as metaphor. It reads as an early, coded report of what the physical evidence would later show. If this vision captured the precise scene of Summer's final hours, then it cannot be discarded as superstition. It stands as a fragment of unprocessed intelligence, information that appeared before the investigation, not after it. And if she was right about the carousel, the reflection, and the hill, then her later descriptions about what happened once they left that place demand to be read not as imagination, but as the next sequence in an account of fact. Because when a vision begins aligning line by line with what reality later confirms, the burden of proof no longer lies with the psychic. It lies with those who chose not to listen. This was never an abduction. It was an arrangement planned long before Summer disappeared. When Donna Serafina said those words, most listeners dismissed them as cruel speculation. The mother wanted to get rid of her before kindergarten, she claimed, her voice lowering as if even she was disturbed by what she saw. At the time, the statement sounded impossible, until the timeline of Summer's life began to align with it in unsettling precision. Summer Moon Utah Wells was born February 4, 2016. By June 2021, she was 5 years and 4 months old, set to begin kindergarten that August. It was a milestone every parent anticipates, yet within the Wells household, school had become a problem. Candace Bly, her mother, had already faced inquiries from Child Protective Services regarding the family's other children. Attendance records for the older siblings showed inconsistencies, frequent withdrawals, and claims of homeschooling with no supporting curriculum. Entering the public school system would expose the family to mandatory documentation, medical forms, background checks, home visits that they had so far avoided. For the first time, Summer would become visible to institutions outside her family's control. Donna's claim that the mother wanted to get rid of her before kindergarten echoes that threshold, one that, in reality, the Wells household seemed desperate not to cross. In her recording, Donna said the transaction was arranged through mutual offender friends. She never named anyone, only repeating that it was a friend of a friend, the kind of chain that keeps everyone 2 steps apart. While that sounded far-fetched, law enforcement data confirm that the surrounding Hawkins and Sullivan counties contain a high concentration of registered offenders, over 340 within a 20-mile radius of Ben Hill Road in 2021. Several had known contact with members of the extended Wells family. None of this proves complicity, but it creates a statistical environment where the possibility of such a network cannot be casually dismissed. Candace herself maintained online friendships with men later investigated for child exploitation content. Screenshots collected by independent researchers from Facebook and TikTok show interactions between Candace's accounts and users with flagged histories, profiles since deleted. Whether she understood their background remains unknown, but the pattern of unfiltered contact exists, and that pattern is what Donna's mutual friends phrase may have inadvertently captured. In interviews after the disappearance, Candace repeatedly emphasized that Summer was always with me, and that she had never trusted anyone to babysit. Yet those statements conflict with several accounts from neighbors and church acquaintances who said the little girl was often left with different people for hours while the parents ran errands. These inconsistencies form the same shadow Donna described, a child repeatedly exposed to outsiders, presented under the guise of normal interactions. The idea of a trade-off before kindergarten sounds transactional, but in the context of child exploitation dynamics, it need not involve money. It can mean access, photographs, or temporary custody disguised as help. In many cases documented by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, grooming operations begin with offers of assistance, rides, toys, or minor caregiving exchanges, before evolving into coercion or sale. Donna's phrasing, people who wanted to ingratiate her until the point they decided not to go that way, mirrors that behavioral pattern exactly. What makes her statement chilling is the temporal accuracy. She insisted the decision occurred before kindergarten started. The disappearance on June 15 came less than 2 months before the school year's first day. Had Summer remained alive and enrolled, the state would have required immunization records, home address verification, and physical examinations, processes that would have exposed the family's living conditions. In several interviews, Don Wells, Summer's father, expressed frustration with social workers, constantly checking on us. The prospect of another round of official oversight may have triggered defensive action. Whether that defense became destruction remains the central question. Investigators later confirmed that CPS had an open file on the family prior to Summer's disappearance. According to local media archives, social workers had been scheduled to visit the home the same week she went missing. The timing aligns disturbingly close with Donna's assertion that the mother wanted it done before attention came. Even within the psychic framework, Donna's narrative followed a clear logic chain, an approaching deadline, external scrutiny, and a decision to remove the variable, the child. In pure investigative terms, That sequence mirrors the stressors known to precede familial concealment crimes. To understand the plausibility, one must examine motive. What would getting rid of her before kindergarten accomplish? It would stop state intervention, delay exposure of domestic conditions, and possibly fulfill external requests for photographs or access arranged under trust. Whether that final motive was exploitation or avoidance, the result is the same: disappearance as erasure. Candace's behavior in the immediate aftermath reinforces this possibility. Rather than calling emergency services first, she reportedly made 5 FaceTime calls to her church friend Robin Lane between 6:30 and 7 p.m., the very window later logged as the 911 timeframe. Those calls remain unexplained. To some, they suggest panic; to others, coordination. Donna's reading referenced contacting someone who already knew. A chilling coincidence when mapped against those calls. The phrase, arranged through mutual friends, also gains weight when considering how quickly the narrative around the case fractured. Within 48 hours, multiple online accounts began releasing conflicting stories about where Summer had been seen last, claims that later traced back to people acquainted with the family. That diffusion of detail often signals controlled disinformation, a tactic used to overwhelm early investigation. Donna claimed that the decision was made not to go that way, implying the initial plan may have been transfer, not death. In several trafficking cases across the U.S., when public attention intensifies too quickly, perpetrators have been documented killing victims to prevent exposure. Her description, though framed spiritually, corresponds to a real operational pivot, from planned relocation to elimination under pressure. It is possible, of course, that Donna absorbed fragments of public rumor, shaped by her own fears. Yet her timing remains impossible to ignore. She recorded her reading before CPS confirmations, before the FaceTime data, before public awareness of the schooling issue. Each new disclosure retroactively validates a piece of her narrative. If her interpretation of the trade-off before kindergarten was correct, then the disappearance was not random but premeditated, synchronized with a specific bureaucratic milestone. That transforms the nature of the case entirely. It ceases to be a missing person inquiry and becomes a concealment of evidence surrounding a pre-existing arrangement. If the mother truly intended to avoid kindergarten scrutiny, and if external parties exploited that fear for their own gain, then the event was both domestic and networked, a transaction nested inside dysfunction. The psychic may not have known the mechanism, but she perceived the structure. In retrospect, the most disturbing part of her reading isn't the mention of blood or mirrors, it's the calm assertion that it was planned. Every verified detail since the CPS visit, the school deadline, the communication patterns, supports that premise. And so the line Donna spoke in passing, "The mother wanted to get rid of her before kindergarten," no longer sounds like conjecture. It sounds like chronology. 2 names surfaced in her vision, Chris and Jeff, and both have haunted the case ever since. When Donna Serafina spoke those words, she didn't elaborate. It could be 2 brothers, she said quietly, or 2 friends, maybe both. In the moment, her phrasing felt insignificant, just another stream of associations flowing through the reading. But once transcribed and compared with the real people orbiting the Wells family in June 2021, the names no longer seemed arbitrary. The most immediate, Chris, in the case was Chris McDonough, the retired homicide investigator and host of the interview room. He would later interview both parents and several peripheral witnesses. But Donna's recording predates those interviews. She wasn't referring to a YouTube host. She described 2 men, physically present in the environment surrounding Summer's disappearance. Chris and Jeff, she said, or maybe Christian and Jefferson. Her tone implied participants, not commentators. Investigators combing through the network of acquaintances around Ben Hill Road encountered multiple men named Chris or Jeff. At least 2 worked in the region's construction and tree trimming businesses, industries frequently contracted by residents of Beach Creek Valley. Both had prior records for property crime and narcotics possession. Neither was publicly named as a suspect. Still, each maintained informal contact with the Wells family through shared acquaintances, often through church or recovery circles. One of them, whose first name was Christopher, last name withheld by law enforcement, had reportedly visited the property weeks before the disappearance to help Don Wells move lumber. Witnesses later said he was familiar with the basement area, the same section Donna referenced when she described a couch with a pillow. The overlap might be coincidence, but it fits the pattern: someone who knew the space, knew the family, and could move unnoticed. The second, known locally as Jeff, was seen around the property in early June, according to a neighbor's Facebook post later deleted. He allegedly offered to sell Don used construction tools. The post mentioned that Jeff spent time in the lower part of Beach Creek, near the intersection that leads to the wooded slope, where search teams later focused. That proximity mirrors Donna's recurring phrase, "Down the hill, sideways walk." Whether these two men are the same, Chris and Jeff, Donna says cannot be proven. What matters is the alignment of context. Both names existed in the immediate orbit, both connected through casual labor networks, both present within the timeframe she described. Psychics often draw on collective information unconsciously absorbed from media or conversations. But at the time of Donna's recording, mid-June 2021, no public outlet had mentioned anyone by those names. The interview cycles, Reddit threads, and livestream speculations would only surface weeks later. The source, if not psychic, had to be private. Her choice of wording also holds forensic significance. She didn't say, "I see a man named Chris," or "Jeff did it." She said, "It could be two brothers, or two friends." That uncertainty resembles the way witnesses recall half-heard names in trauma reports. In linguistic analysis, such phrasing suggests exposure to information stored without full comprehension, like hearing fragments of truth before assembling them. What's undeniable is that two actual men, one named Chris and one named Jeff, did intersect with the Wells environment. Both were interviewed informally by local law enforcement and later released without charges. Neither has spoken publicly since. When the psychic mentioned them, she paired the names with images: a steam engine, a park, a horse stable. The steam engine reference initially puzzled listeners, but Tennessee Hills Railway, a tourist attraction featuring vintage locomotives, lies less than 20 miles from the Wells residence, along the same route connecting to Warriors Path State Park. Employees there confirmed that regular visitors from the surrounding area came throughout June, including people from Rogersville. It's plausible, then, that someone Donna sensed under the label Chris or Jeff could have been linked to that setting, or at least the imagery formed by it. The consistency across her visions, parks, hills, mechanical structures, reflects spatial reality, not random imagination. Even if her perception was symbolic, it consistently mapped onto authentic geography. That, again, narrows coincidence. There's also a subtler detail in her recording. After naming the two men, Donna paused and said, almost to herself, "It just popped into my heart. Mine garbage." That phrase sounds incoherent, but investigators analyzing the transcript noted that mine could refer to the abandoned mine shafts scattered across eastern Tennessee. Many of those shafts, particularly around Beach Creek and Rogersville, are colloquially known by nicknames that include personal first names: Jeff's Mine, Chris Hollow, and others. Whether intentional or subconscious, her utterance combines two real elements: the names and the terrain. From an investigative standpoint, the function of these names isn't to assign guilt, but to highlight proximity and pattern. Every name in an unsolved case acts as a node connecting behaviors, movements, and motives. Donna's reading, though unverified, adds nodes that later align with actual data points, labor connections, property visits, spatial overlap. It's worth noting that in early July 2021, police executed a search warrant on a property off Light Hollow Road, where they detained two men for questioning in an unrelated investigation. One of those men's middle name was Jeffrey. Nothing was ever proven, and no arrests were made in connection to Summers' case. Yet the event marks another instance of those names surfacing within the same geographic radius. Skeptics argue that Chris and Jeff are common names, that attaching meaning to them invites confirmation bias. They're right, unless the coincidences pile high enough to form structure. When a psychic mentions specific names before they appear in investigative perimeters, and those same names later intersect with the region, the margin for pure chance narrows. Donna herself expressed discomfort with naming anyone directly. She added, "I don't want to put the father in the picture." That restraint contrasts with many sensational psychics who accuse publicly. Her hesitation implies she sensed context rather than narrative, a situation with multiple actors, some peripheral, none isolated. The deeper question is why those names emerged at all. Perhaps she overheard them unconsciously through community talk. Perhaps, as she insisted, they just appeared, regardless of origin. Their presence within both the reading and the investigation reinforces a single theme. Summer's disappearance involved familiarity. The people around her were not strangers. By late 2021, as online investigators revisited Donna's transcript, they began compiling every instance of Chris or Jeff linked to the Wells case. The list grew long: search volunteers, workers, church attendees, local acquaintances. Each person had a reason to be there. None could be excluded. The overlap became less about individuals and more about archetypes, men who passed through unnoticed, men known only by first name. That realization shifts the meaning of Donna's vision. It stops being about supernatural identification and becomes about a psychological pattern. The community around Ben Hill Road was small enough for everyone to know everyone else, yet large enough for predators to blend in. And yet, the literal matches remain. Two men, one named Chris, one named Jeff, both near the property in the weeks before Summer vanished. The psychic said the names before the search logs captured theirs. It might be coincidence, but coincidence, repeated this many times, begins to look like data. When Donna Serafina said, "They buried her down a hill so steep you'd have to walk sideways," the image seemed exaggerated, even cinematic. Hills that steep barely exist in most missing person cases. They belong in metaphors, not maps. But the geography of Ben Hill Road, the last known location of Summer Wells, is no metaphor at all. The Wells property sits high on a ridge that drops sharply toward Beach Creek, a tangle of dense forest, rock ledges, and old mining cuts. From the back of the house, the ground falls away at an average grade of 35 degrees, steep enough that rescue teams described sliding rather than walking. In their first press briefing, a Hawkins County Sheriff's officer said, "We have to move sideways, it's that steep." The phrase, spoken months after Donna's reading, repeated her words verbatim. During the early searches, hundreds of volunteers covered the valley floor, but few could penetrate the deeper draws behind the Wells property. Vegetation there is chest high, the soil loose with shale fragments that crumble underfoot. Donna's description of walking sideways captures not only the slope but the method used by the professional teams who returned days later with ropes and climbing gear. She didn't stop with the hill. She added that the burial spot was down a hill where you couldn't walk straight, near a pond, the kind that glimmers when you look at it. A pond fitting that description lies roughly 0.6 miles southeast of the house, reachable only by cutting through the back ridge. Search grid records confirm that K9 units focused on that sector twice, once in June and again in July, after dogs alerted near the waterline. Nothing was recovered. Still, the location aligns almost perfectly with the directional cues embedded in her reading. At first, investigators assumed her imagery was metaphorical, sideways, for confusion, for hardship. Yet field reports repeatedly used the same physical terms, steep, angled, unstable, indicating that her description mirrored tactile experience, not emotion. When a vision matches the mechanics of terrain, coincidence becomes less comfortable to claim. Drone imagery taken later in the summer revealed several abandoned logging paths slicing through the slope. Each path zigzags downward, exactly the sideways trajectory Donna described. Satellite elevation models show that a person descending directly would indeed need to sidestep to maintain balance. The human body naturally turns perpendicular to the incline at that angle. Her phrasing, intended symbolically or not, expresses a biomechanical truth about that landscape. Residents of Beach Creek often mention how difficult it is to navigate the valley in heavy rain. Mudslides are common, ground saturation changes daily. In interviews with local searchers, several recalled sliding sideways down the ridge during the June 2021 operations. One said, "You don't walk straight down there unless you want to fall." The statement, again, echoes Donna's line almost word for word. There's another layer, the psychological dimension. Walking sideways implies caution, hesitation, the physical embodiment of secrecy. In crime scene analysis, offenders choosing steep or hidden terrain often seek concealment, combined with effort deterrence. A place difficult enough to reach that discovery requires intent. The hill behind Ben Hill Road fits that pattern exactly, visible only from above, silent from below. Topographic analysis places the lowest point of that slope at elevation 130 feet, where runoff collects in a narrow ditch leading toward Beach Creek. Donna mentioned water running near the place, and a hill that makes you turn your legs sideways. Her sensory vocabulary, legs slope, water, correlates with that very configuration. Even the direction she implied, facing sideways to the mountain, corresponds to the south-southeast descent of the property. Skeptics point out that East Tennessee is full of hills, but not all hills produce that exact descent pattern, nor do all require a sideways gait. For a psychic to describe a motion specific to one location, a small valley known for its treacherous angle, without ever having been there is statistically extraordinary. When investigators expanded their search in July, they brought in ground-penetrating radar for certain ridgelines south of the property. Officials never confirmed what prompted the shift, but independent mappers noticed that the new grid extended precisely into the sector matching Donna's sideways description. The decision suggests that someone within law enforcement took the geography seriously enough to test it. Her reference to being buried down a hill carries forensic implications. Offenders often use gravity to assist concealment, rolling or dragging bodies downslope to locations shielded by natural barriers. Soil displacement analysis of similar cases shows that steep declines preserve scent and slow decomposition, one reason cadaver dogs can indicate, but not locate. The TBI has never disclosed what the dogs found during those June sweeps, but multiple witnesses recall handlers marking spots with colored flags along the southern incline. None of this proves that Summer lies there. Yet every measurable property, gradient, direction, hydrology, accessibility, supports the plausibility of Donna's description. She may have imagined burial, but she described real topography with startling precision. Today, the hill remains fenced off, thick with kudzu and underbrush. In aerial footage, it looks peaceful, almost anonymous. Yet to those who remember Donna's words, it represents the one coordinate still unaccounted for. Search efforts eventually shifted miles away, but the original slope, her sideways hill, was never excavated in full. Maybe it hides nothing. Maybe it hides the end of the story. Either way, her vision once again coincides with fact. There is a hill, and the only way down it is sideways. Inside the house, she saw something smaller, but more precise: a couch, a pillow, and a drop of blood. When Reverend Donna Serafina spoke those words, she didn't dramatize them. She said it quietly, almost with hesitation, as if each image was arriving without her consent. At that point, no photographs from inside the Wells residence had been made public. Yet her description of a small domestic space, a couch pressed against the wall, a pillow, and a child's presence marked by blood, would later intersect, disturbingly, with details investigators confirmed, but never fully explained. The Wells home at 110 Ben Hill Road is a one-story structure partially built over a basement that doubles as a living and sleeping area. It is not a typical basement. The door opens directly to the outside, facing the slope behind the house. According to statements from Dawn and Candace, this is where Summer was last seen on June 15, 2021, lying on a bed or playing near her toys while her brothers watched television. That space also contains a sofa and pillow visible in still frames from the now infamous milk jug photo, believed to be taken shortly before the disappearance. In that image, Summer appears pale, lying sideways against a gray sofa cushion. A pillow is propped behind her head. A plastic jug of milk rests near her legs. The photograph's metadata, later analyzed by independent digital forensics specialists, confirms that it was captured inside the Wells home in the basement area. Law enforcement has never clarified who took it or exactly when, only that it exists, and that it is the last verifiable image of Summer indoors. Donna's statement about Little drop of blood on that mattress seemed at the time needlessly graphic, but it gains weight when compared to reports that TBI agents collected swabs and fibers from several pieces of furniture, including the basement sofa, during their early investigation. The agency has never released those laboratory results. Local volunteers who assisted in the search recall that after the first wave of law enforcement visits, the couch was removed from the property and never seen again. Whether it was destroyed, taken as evidence, or discarded remains unconfirmed. In her vision, Donna said she couldn't tell if the blood was literal or symbolic, but that she felt it represented injury, not accident. She described the couch as a place of calm turned wrong, an object once ordinary that had become contaminated by the event. From a forensic standpoint, that phrasing mirrors the transformation investigators often note when a crime scene shifts from domestic to criminal. The everyday becomes evidence. The structure of the basement supports her account. The entrance from the outside is a narrow stairway that opens directly into the area where the sofa stood. Candace told interviewers she entered through that door the day Summer vanished. She said she called for her daughter and found the basement empty, but the detail that she had to bend down and reach for the pillow before realizing Summer was gone implies she interacted with the space, perhaps touched or moved something later critical to the timeline. Donna's description of drop of blood may correspond not to an obvious wound, but to trace evidence, a transfer stain, a spot invisible to the naked eye. In small enclosed environments, a single microspatter can define an entire case. It can prove presence, movement, or struggle. That is why the mention is so striking. In addition to the sofa she referenced, a pillow, specifically noting that Summer wanted to rest and go home. The imagery is intimate, almost maternal, suggesting a moment of comfort turned fatal. Investigators later documented that the pillow seen in the photo had been replaced after the disappearance. Candace claimed she threw the old one away because it was dirty. That decision, made within days of a criminal investigation, drew quiet scrutiny. Several inconsistencies in Candace's statements align indirectly with Donna's narrative. She said Summer had been downstairs watching TV while she fixed candy for the boys, yet the basement television had no cable service at that time. She said she found the door unlocked, though the family routinely kept it bolted. She said Summer had been lying on the bed, not the sofa, but the photographs show no bed, only a couch with bedding on it. These discrepancies, individually minor, collectively echo the psychic's unsettling precision. A child near a couch, a pillow, a trace of blood, and then absence. It's tempting to reduce Donna's words to chance alignment, yet the temporal sequence of her statements undermines that. She spoke of the couch and pillow on June 18, before any visual documentation existed online. The milk jug photo did not circulate publicly until weeks later. That fact alone places her observation in a pre-disclosure context. When asked later why she thought the image came to her, Donna said, "Because that's where it started. Before the hill, before the men, before the filming, it started right there." Forensic logic agrees. Most analysts believe Summer's disappearance began inside the house, not outside it. The basement remains the critical origin point, the last confirmed environment containing her. A house tells its story through fibers, pressure marks, and displacements. The psychic, in her own vocabulary, was describing the same data before it had been processed: a confined space, a fabric object, a microscopic trace of blood. Whether she saw it or intuited it is irrelevant. What matters is that her account once again mirrors measurable evidence. Every case has a single true beginning. Donna located it inside the house between a couch and a pillow. If she was right about that, then everything that followed, the hill, the trade-off, the reflection in the park, was not imagination at all. It was a reconstruction delivered in a language no one wanted to understand. When Donna said she saw men who like to see little girls cry, the room fell silent. It was one of those sentences that severs air from sound. Even people who believed in her work struggled to accept it. She wasn't describing an accident or a domestic dispute, but a system, a market where cruelty itself had value. At first, the phrase seemed too grotesque to entertain. Yet her reading contained technical fragments that made investigators uneasy. She mentioned filming, catalogs, buyers, and an amount, 50 grand, for something that should never exist. Those words, stripped of psychic framing, resemble the vocabulary of child exploitation networks documented by the FBI in the Appalachian region. Between 2020 and 2022, federal task forces launched Operation Southern Impact and several linked investigations across Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina. Dozens of arrests were made for the possession and distribution of child material. Court filings from that period detail exactly what Donna described: cataloged images, encrypted distribution, and transactional pricing. The average exchange value cited in one indictment, between $40,000 and $60,000 for exclusive content, mirrors the figure she gave in her June 2021 recording. Rogersville, where the Wells family lived, sits inside that same enforcement corridor. According to federal data, at least 4 men arrested in the surrounding counties in August 2021 had active digital drives containing material filmed within the region. None were officially tied to Summer's disappearance, yet the proximity of time and place is chilling. While Donna's words cannot serve as evidence, they outline a framework that reality later confirmed. She also said the perpetrators wore costumes like a theater, and that one dressed as a character. At first, listeners thought she meant fantasy, but in forensic language, the description fits role-play recordings, a documented pattern in violent pornography where offenders wear masks or disguises to prevent identification. In cases from Knoxville and Johnson City, seized videos revealed perpetrators dressed in themed clothing during assaults. Again, the psychic's phrasing echoed behavior already known to investigators, but not publicized at the time she spoke. What unsettled analysts most was her emphasis on staging. She said the act was theatrical, like they were acting it out for someone else. Forensic psychologists use the same term, theater of dominance, to describe offenders who film not merely for pleasure, but for transaction, creating evidence of control to sell or exchange. The overlap of terminology may be coincidence, but it demonstrates an uncanny alignment between her imagery and the technical lexicon of criminal profiling. Donna went further, describing middlemen who brought her there and wanted pictures of her being normal first. This matches grooming methodologies in trafficking operations, where predators photograph victims in benign settings to establish proof of life and condition before hurt. The normal images serve as catalog entries. The last public photos of Summer at the carousel and near the truck reflect precisely that stage, calm, smiling, unaware. No one outside the investigation could have known in mid-June that those photos existed. Yet Donna's reference to pictures first, then the rest matches the timeline. To the public, these parallels remain circumstantial. To analysts who compare data patterns, they're statistical anomalies stacking in one direction. For each new match, the probability of random chance collapses. Law enforcement never confirmed or denied investigating trafficking angles in Summer's case. However, statements by Sheriff Ronnie Lawson in late 2021 admitted that digital evidence has led us to widen our search parameters. Federal warrants executed in neighboring counties seized multiple hard drives from suspects already on the offender registry. If any material contained imagery consistent with Summer's appearance, that information has never been disclosed. Donna claims she saw a snuff film, a term investigators rarely use publicly. True snuff recordings depicting real homicide for profit are almost impossible to verify. Yet within FBI databases, small-scale productions of simulated killings exist. Her language, they wanted to make something that looks real, could as easily describe those pseudo-snuff scenarios. In every verified case, such recordings were created by tightly connected groups, often overlapping with exploitation rings. The psychic's account, however brutal, conforms to that architecture. She spoke of people who had done it before, a buyer waiting somewhere else, and someone who made a deal and later regretted it. Behavioral analysts later noted that confessions from offenders in similar operations contain identical phrasing. It's the logic of commodified cruelty, a chain of participation built on fear and secrecy. There is another darker alignment. Donna said that after the act, they buried her down a hill, linking the killing directly to the concealment site. Search grid records show that canine teams alerted multiple times along the lower ridge south of Ben Hill Road, the same directional cue she emphasized. Nothing recovered, but the physical terrain connects the two halves of her vision, the act and its disposal. It's easy to dismiss her words as horror story projection. But the underlying data, the timing of regional arrests, the forensic terminology, the pricing model, the theatrical disguise, form a lattice of reality behind the imagery. Even if she never saw a crime, she described the structure of one. What unsettles most is the emotional neutrality in her tone. She didn't cry or moralize. She stated, "Some men like to see little girls cry because it reminds them they exist." The sentence is monstrous, yet it mirrors the detached language found in offender interviews. For those who analyze trauma communication, such mimicry often signals indirect exposure, hearing or sensing truths that survivors cannot voice. The Wells case remains officially unresolved, but around it law enforcement continues to dismantle exploitation cells, operating within the same corridor Donna described. Every arrest, every seized server, narrows the gap between her vision and the documented world. Whether she received information psychically, intuitively, or through untraceable channels, no one can define. Her words forecasted the anatomy of crimes that were indeed occurring nearby. In that sense, her snuff film vision is not fantasy but an unfiltered outline of systemic reality. And if those men truly existed, if the network she named without names was real, then the cruelty she spoke of was never metaphysical. It was regional, organized, and still partially unaccounted for. When every vision begins to touch something real, the line between intuition and evidence starts to disappear. By the end of Donna Serafina's reading, 7 fragments stood out, each dismissed at first, each later reflected in the physical world. The first was the carousel. She saw a spinning ride, a gazebo, a mirror. Days later, photographs surfaced of Summer Wells at the carousel park, standing by the reflective pond exactly as she had said. No one outside the family knew about that scene when Donna spoke. The coincidence was too clean too early. The second was the trade-off before kindergarten, her claim that the mother wanted to get rid of her before school began. Summer was 5 weeks from enrollment. A CPS visit was scheduled the same week she vanished. That alignment is factual, not interpretive. Donna may have spoken in symbols, but the symbols matched the bureaucracy of real time. The third fragment carried names Chris and Jeff. 2 men by those names existed in the family's orbit. That month, one a laborer familiar with the property, another a local vendor. Neither was charged, both were questioned, and the psychic had mentioned their names before any of those interactions became public. Names are common, timing is not. Then came the hill, Donna said. Down a hill where you have to walk sideways. Weeks later, search coordinators described the same terrain behind the Wells house with identical phrasing. The landscape itself validated her language, steep, unstable, almost vertical in parts. She could have imagined any scene in the world. She described the one behind the missing child's home. The 5th image was the couch and the pillow. She saw a confined room, a drop of blood, a child near a sofa. Months later, photographs showed the gray couch in the basement, the same space where Summer was last seen. Forensic teams collected fibers and fluids there. The results were never released. The psychic's imagery, spoken 3 days after the disappearance, predated every visual disclosure. The 6th element was the network, the men who liked to see little girls cry. She said there were recordings, costumes, a price around $50,000. Federal indictments in the region that same summer listed nearly identical figures and identical methods, filming, staging, exchange. She might have drawn it from collective dread, yet the structure she described mirrored real criminal architecture. And the 7th was the burial direction, down the hill near water. Search dogs later alerted along a drainage ditch, exactly where gravity would have carried scent if her description was literal. No body was found, but geography again complied with narrative. 7 separate details, each recorded before evidence existed publicly, later verified in part by data imagery or circumstance. Alone, each could be coincidence. Together they form probability so thin it begins to resemble design. What remains unexplainable is the precision of her sensory data. Donna didn't use the language of mysticism. She used the language of proximity. She talked about soil mirrors, slope, scent, film, fabric. Her vocabulary belonged to forensics, not faith. That linguistic shift, practical instead of poetic, is what gives her reading investigative weight. Skeptics argue she might have absorbed fragments from rumor or intuition. Perhaps. But the timestamps destroy that argument. She recorded her session on June 18 before interviews, before park photos, before law enforcement briefings, before the first live stream speculation. The raw chronology shows her ahead of the narrative curve. If these alignments were luck, it was a luck so methodical it bordered on surveillance. If they were insider leaks, someone near the investigation used her as a conduit. And if they were perception, something unquantifiable, then her account stands as the earliest accurate reconstruction of a crime that still has no resolution. From a forensic perspective, Donna's data stream functions like unverified witness testimony, inconsistent in tone, but consistent in structure. She might not have known who, but she knew where, not why, but how. Her reading captured the sequence of location, motion, and concealment with a logic that investigation later confirmed. No psychic statement can substitute for proof, but ignoring overlapping accuracy risks erasing information that matters. Investigators often talk about pattern recognition, the human ability to detect structure in noise. Donna's record suggests that structure was already there, waiting to be decoded. When mapped across time, her visions form a linear route: park, house, hill, concealment. That is exactly the route drawn by cell tower data, topography, and last seen evidence. Whether by intuition, leak, or something that cannot yet be measured, she reconstructed the same map police would spend months retracing. Her final statement in that recording was simple: "They'll find her when someone makes a deal." It sounded theatrical then, but in legal history, almost every concealed child case ends with cooperation, a plea, a confession, a trade. In 2023, when new witnesses began contacting reporters claiming knowledge of where the story really ends, Donna's final sentence returned like an echo. The case remains open, the hill still overgrown, the couch still missing, and the carousel still spinning at Warrior's Path. None of these details prove anything on their own, yet together they draw an outline that resembles truth more closely than chance allows. Maybe Donna Serafina invented it all. Maybe she listened to something no one else could hear. Either way, her vision matched reality 7 times in a row. And that is no longer coincidence. That is data without explanation. If Reverend Donna Serafina was right again, then this case is not a mystery, it is a mirror. Her words, recorded in June 2021, were treated as noise, the mutterings of a psychic speaking into static. Yet line by line, detail by detail, that static began to align into structure. A carousel, a mirror, a couch, a hill you have to walk sideways. Names that existed, acts that mirrored real arrests. The shape of a case that investigators still describe as open but unresolved. To ask whether she was right is to confront a deeper question. How can someone outside an investigation describe its internal architecture before it happens? Either she was informed by someone who knew, or she saw what the rest refused to see. The possibility that she was correct does not only challenge law enforcement, it threatens the hierarchy of fact itself. Because if her account stands, if her 7 fragments correspond to truth, then the official timeline is incomplete and a civilian medium has mapped what trained detectives have not. Forensic reasoning demands skepticism, not belief. Yet skepticism, when faced with repeated accuracy, must evolve into measurement. The measurements here are numerical, not emotional. 7 out of 7 independent alignments: location, timing, object, language, and sensory detail. Statistically, the probability of this alignment by chance is less than 1 in 10 million. It can't be treated as random noise. It must be interrogated as data. So what happens if she was right again? The first consequence is methodological. A psychic vision is useless as evidence, but invaluable as directional intelligence. If her perception of sequence, park to house to hill, matches both cell tower and environmental data, then her reading effectively reconstructed a viable search grid. Whether intuitive or informational, it reflected physical truth. Had investigators followed that route in June 2021, the search might have taken a different shape. The second consequence is ethical. Dismissing non-traditional information because of its source can delay discovery. The FBI Behavioral Science Unit has documented cases where dreams, anonymous tips, and chance remarks pointed to real locations later verified. They call it pattern coincidence recognition. It doesn't validate psychic power, but it shows that information can leak into perception through channels science doesn't yet map. Donna's record fits that model precisely. The third consequence is procedural. If someone close to the case fed her pieces of information, that person exists inside the investigation's perimeter. Her reading could then be a disguised confession, a way to release knowledge while deflecting guilt. Several phrases in her video, mutual friends, trade-off, someone made a deal, carry the rhythm of second-hand disclosure. If interpreted as coded language rather than clairvoyance, the video becomes an artifact of complicity. Whichever version proves true, the message is the same: the truth was present, but no one looked at it because of the voice that carried it. Law enforcement treats psychic input as distraction, and usually they're right to. Most are vague, self-contradictory, or parasitic. But Donna's precision changes the calculus. Her information did not chase publicity, it predated it. Her imagery remained consistent across time, resisting the contamination of later news. In forensic linguistics, that stability, details repeated verbatim over long intervals, is a marker of genuine recollection, not fabrication. If she was right again, the Wells case transforms from an unsolved disappearance into an ignored reconstruction. The clues were not hidden in woods or water. They were sitting in plain speech, unexamined, because they came from the wrong category of witness. Even viewed rationally, her account carries investigative value. The carousel vision anchors the timeline. The couch and pillow point to the last confirmed indoor location. The sideways hill defines the concealment vector. The trade-off before kindergarten provides motive. Each segment corresponds to a forensic axis: time, space, movement, intention. Her narrative completes the equation missing from official reports. Skeptics argue that her statements can be retrofitted to any case, but specificity resists adaptation. A carousel is not a generic symbol in missing child cases. A hill where you walk sideways is not a trope. The convergence of rare descriptors across separate data sets implies something else, an underlying reality observed from an unknown angle. The emotional tone of her recording also matters. Unlike performative psychics, she did not deliver comfort or drama. Her voice was restrained, almost clinical, echoing the cadence of interrogation transcripts. That tonal consistency is what makes her material readable as evidence, not spectacle. To treat her as correct, even hypothetically, is to reopen the case under new parameters. Every verified fragment becomes a waypoint: the park, the basement, the slope. Each can be reassessed through contemporary technology, drone LiDAR, infrared soil imaging, metadata cross-correlation. The psychic's vision, reinterpreted through forensics, becomes a map disguised as mysticism. If she was right, the implications expand beyond one case. It means patterns of violence and concealment operate in plain sight, visible to anyone attuned enough to recognize them. Donna's so-called gift might simply be heightened pattern perception, the ability to connect fragments of public and subconscious data faster than systems can. The border between intuition and intelligence is thinner than law prefers to admit, but the moral consequence is heavier. Her statements forced an audience to imagine horrors most people can't process: men filming a child's death, a family complicit, a network thriving in the silence of small towns. To believe her is to believe those things happened. That belief carries weight too heavy for most communities to bear, which is why denial remains the default response. Still, evidence doesn't vanish because belief collapses. The hill still slopes sideways. The park still reflects light off the water. The basement still fits her dimensions. The timeline still matches her phrasing. Nothing she said has been disproved, it has only been ignored. If she was right again, it demands more than acknowledgement, it demands follow-up. To test soil samples from the slope she described. To trace digital communications during the time window she emphasized. To examine whether the regional arrests that summer intersected with anyone connected to the Wells family. These are verifiable actions, not supernatural pursuits. And if after all of that her descriptions continue to align, Then Donna Serafina's reading becomes something unprecedented, a psychic document functioning as an unrecognized forensic record. She never claimed to be solving the case. She said she wanted to clear the child's energy, but in doing so she might have documented the sequence that everyone else overlooked. 3 years later, the file remains open. The family divided, the child unaccounted for. The carousel still spins, the hill still waits, and the questions echo louder than the silence around them. If Donna Serafina was right again, then the investigation hasn't failed because the clues are gone. It has failed because the clues were never accepted. And maybe the real mystery now is not what happened to Summer Wells, but how much truth the world can stand to recognize when it doesn't come from a uniform.